Hello everyone, my name is Jennifer and welcome to Best Kept Plans. Today's video is going to be all about the books that I read in September 2022. If you're interested in seeing that, please stick around. I am so excited to talk with you all about the books that I read in September 2022. September ended up being a much better reading month than I was anticipating, and I've got a lot of books that I'm really happy to talk about and excited to share with you all. I will say this is my second attempt at trying to film this video. I film with natural light, but I'm dealing with a weird lighting situation in my house right now. So I was trying to film in a different location, the spot that I probably film most of my forward-facing videos in, and it was just creating all of these shadows across my face. So I moved everything over. Hopefully this will work out a little bit better, but if there's funky lighting going on, bear with me, I apologize. As usual, I will be referencing my Archer and Olive B. Harris collab reading journal. This is where I keep track of every book that I read. This thing is getting thick. I started this in February when I started reading regularly again, and I just can't believe how chunky this notebook is. But I will be referencing this. And so the first book that I want to talk about is one that was in my September TBR. I have to say I kept pretty consistent with my September TBR, which I'm really happy about. I've had this book for a while. I have heard nothing but incredible things about it, which is part of the reason why I haven't read it yet. I've been very, very nervous that this book was not going to live up to the expectations that I had for it, given how hyped it is. It's talked about a lot, and it's always talked about really, really positively. And so I was very nervous that I was not going to like this book, and I was going to be really disappointed that I didn't like it. And that book is The 7 Husbands of Evelyn Hugo by Taylor Jenkins Reid. I was not disappointed, at all. I ended up really loving this book. I gave this 5 stars. It is definitely my favorite Taylor Jenkins Reid book. I loved it because it was very different than what I was expecting. The title definitely gives you, or at least it gave me, what I thought was a very clear idea about what the book was going to be about. And yes, the book does take you through all of the husbands and marriages of Evelyn Hugo. But it does so in a really, really interesting way, and the relationships are not what you would expect or anticipate, and I thought that really added to the value of this book. I also really loved that the main character was Cuban. I am Cuban, and so it's always fun to encounter a main character that is Hispanic or Latinx, especially in a story that's as well known as this one and has been as wide received as this one. So that was really cool, and I really, really like this. The next book that I read was my September book for my Instagram challenge. My Instagram challenge involved me basically asking people on Instagram for book recommendations. And every month in 2022, I read one book that was recommended to me by someone on Instagram. And for the month of September, the book that was recommended by, I think it's at Lady with Less. And she recommended The Stranger by Albert Camus. And I did not know anything about this author. This is a brand new author to me. The book is very, very short. So I will say that was a little reassuring to me in the sense that I was well, if I don't really like it, at least it's short. But I ended up really liking this. This is super different. I don't know if I have a way of really describing it. What I will say is that I really connected with the way that with the author's style of writing. And it very much reminded me of J.D. Salinger's style of writing. I don't think I've ever talked about J.D. Salinger in any of my book videos. I've obviously not read any J.D. Salinger books in 2022 if you've been watching my book videos, and that's because I've pretty much read everything that there is to read from him, except for one story, which I'm actually kind of like saving, which may not be the best thing, because what if I like get hit by a car tomorrow? I'll never have read it, which would be a real bummer. But I love J.D. Salinger. He's one of my favorite authors. I really, really love his style of writing. Most people know him from The Catcher in the Rye, but I will say that I don't feel like that novel is very representative of him as an author. He's a short story author. Catcher in the Rye is the only novel that he ever wrote. It's probably one of my least favorite things that I've read from him. Honestly, I think that his short stories are so much better. And so reading this really gave me like the vibe and the energy of the short stories that I've read from Salinger. And so I think that even like made my reading experience with The Stranger even better. I will say that the main character is a stranger. He is a stranger to those around him, and maybe even a little bit to himself. And I really, really liked that. And reading this, I gave it 4.5 stars. Definitely actually made me want to read more from this author, which I wasn't anticipating. So I definitely want to pick up more from this author and give more of his stories a try. The next book that I read was another one that was on my TBR. I picked this up because I wanted to read something based in the literary world. I really enjoy book lovers, and I wanted to read something kind of similar to that. And so I ended up picking up Meet Me in the Margins by Melissa Ferguson. This was a really cute romance. Is it one of my favorite romances I've ever read? No. But that doesn't mean I didn't enjoy it. I really, really did enjoy this. It's a closed door romance. I think that's how you would describe it. And even though like I don't look for closed-door romances, like I don't mind when romances have more explicit scenes in them. I also don't mind reading a closed-door romance either. And I will say that I don't feel like it being a closed-door romance like took away at all from like the enjoyment of the book or like the connection of the two characters. I actually thought that the way that the author had the two characters interacting with each other was really sweet and a unique part of the story. So I ended up giving this 3.5 stars. I liked it. It was not a favorite, but I did enjoy reading it. The next book that I read was also on my TBR. I picked this up because I have really been dying to read a romance series. I have just had in the back of my mind that I want something similar to like The Simple Wilds, where I'm following one couple, the same characters through multiple books. And I did read the Summer I Turned Pretty series recently, but that was more of like a young adult romance. I really wanted something that was an adult romance series. And I heard that this was a series. I had seen it a lot here on YouTube. It seems to be fairly well liked. And so I picked it up. It was also on my TBR, and it is The Fine Print by Lauren Asher. I really ended up loving this. I feel like this book was meant for me to read it because it takes place basically in like the fictionalized version of Disney World. The main character, him and his two brothers, are heirs to a Dreamland billionaire company. That's the company's called Dreamland. Or I don't even know if the company's called Dreamland, but the theme park that's part of this company is called Dreamland. Dreamland is basically Disney World, and him and his brothers are going to inherit this company, but they basically have to each do something to inherit their shares. And this book centers around the youngest of the three brothers, and he has to go and work at Dreamland, and he meets someone there and a romance ensues. I really enjoyed the two main characters. I can understand why the male character has the feelings that he has towards or about romance and relationships. But I also really loved that the female main character just constantly kept proving him wrong. That was really sweet. And I just loved everything about it. It really sucked me in. This is a thicker book, and I ended up reading it in 2 days. I just really loved it. And so I ended up giving it 5 stars. And when I finished it, or when I was close to finishing it, I did a little bit of research about the series because I really didn't know anything else about the series. And I ended up finding out that it's a 3-book series. The first 2 books have come out. The 3rd book is going to be coming out in January 2023. So I immediately, when I finished this, went to the bookstore and picked up the 2nd book in the series. And I wanted to dive into it right away. Like, I was so invested in these characters. So I ended up picking the 2nd book up. It's called Terms and Conditions. I dove into it right away. And then I was like, what? Why? Because it's not about the same characters that the first book is about. I looked up how many books are in the series and what ones are out, but I didn't look up a synopsis or anything. I really do try to go into books blind. And it's not about the same characters. Which was wild. I was so bummed. I was so invested in the 2 main characters from the fine print that I just wanted to keep up with their relationship. And this book is actually centered around the oldest of the 3 brothers, and him trying to fulfill what he needs to fulfill to get his shares in the company they're inheriting. So I was bummed that it wasn't about the same characters as the fine print, but I will say that, of the 3 brothers, after Rowan, the character in the fine print, I was most interested in learning about Declan, who's the character in Terms and Conditions. He's the oldest brother. He had a really intriguing task that he had to fulfill to get his inheritance. And I ended up really, really enjoying this book. It's super chunky as well. I flew through it in 2 days as well. I don't think I gave it 5 stars, and I don't think that I could say that I like one over the other. I love the setting of the first one because it's basically Disney World. I loved the 2 male main characters, the brothers. I really enjoy the 2 of them. Personality wise, they are, they make you roll your eyes, but in an endearing way that you still love them. And I really, really like the 2 female characters as well. So I can't say that I like one over the other. I really, really love both of them. And I'm very, very intrigued to read the 3rd book in the series. Again, it's coming out in January. I'm definitely going to have to pick it up right away and read it. It is about the middle brother. And I will say that after reading the first book, I was so glad the second one was about the oldest brother because I really didn't have any interest about reading the middle brother's story. But you do get more with the middle brother in the second book because he's best friends with the female character in here. And kind of getting a little bit more of him in the second book. I'm definitely intrigued to read the 3rd. So I'm so glad I loved the series so far. I hope the 3rd book lives up to it. It's going to be harder for it to live up to it just because I'm not as intrigued by the middle brother, but very excited. The next book was also on my TBR. It is something that I have heard a lot of really good things about. People seem to really enjoy this book, and that is Iona Iverson's Rules for Commuting. So this is a newer release. It's, again, something that a lot of people seem to really enjoy when they read it, and I will say I really enjoyed it as well. It's just a straight fiction. There is a little bit of romance in it, but it's not a romance novel. It is about people commuting to work and the relationships that end up building between these people who all happen to commute on the same train to work. I think it's really a wonderful story about found family, or your friends being your family, and how important those types of relationships are. It's told from several different people's perspectives. I do like that in a story. I enjoy when we get different people's perspectives. This is at least 5 or 6 people's perspectives, which I really liked. It didn't get confusing, even though it's being told from that many different perspectives. And I ended up giving this 4.5 stars. I really, really liked this book. The next book that I read is actually a collection of poems. I have not read poetry in a very long time. When I was in 5th grade, I had a teacher, I'll never forget her. She's probably the best teacher I ever had, but she used to make us memorize poems. And every month we would have to memorize a poem and recite it to her and get graded on it. And every month the poems had to get longer and longer and longer. And it was basically a tool that she used to teach us memorization, which I will say ended up being like super, super beneficial to me when I was in high school and college, nursing school for sure. But I swear that it like gave me a fear of poetry. I haven't really read poetry since. But I was intrigued by this book's cover. I saw this when I was just like walking down an aisle at the bookstore and I was like, ooh, I want to read that. And I thought it was a short story, but it was a collection of poems. And it is called Please Love Me at My Worst by Michaela Angemeer. I'm probably saying that wrong. It is broken down into like different sections. I think one's like, Please Love My Inner Child. Wait, here we go. I'll read them. So we have the sections which are called Please Love My Inner Child, Please Love Me at My Worst, Please Love Me for Who I Am, Please Love Who I'm Becoming. And I really ended up liking this. It was so different from anything I've read recently, obviously, but there was so much meaning behind the words in these poems. They're very short, they're very simple, but the author gets across her point. She really, really does. And so I ended up giving this 4 stars, and it made me like intrigued to potentially read more poetry in the near future. So the next book that I read, I actually picked up when I picked this up. So I think I had said in a previous video that I really wanted to try to not like do any more book hauls or buy too many more books from now until the end of the year, that I really want to read the books that I have, with the exception of new releases, right? And I actually even talked about Carrie Soto Is Back, which is the new release from Taylor Jenkins Reid, and I haven't even picked that up yet. I'm actually filming this on September 30th, the last day of the month, and I still haven't picked it up. I actually now think I'm not going to pick it up anytime soon. I'm just going to give it some time, and maybe pick it up like in the new year when I do like my first book haul of 2023. But I went to the bookstore with a very specific intention, and it was to pick up a romance series. Even though I love the fine print and I love terms and conditions, I was still really wanting to read a romance series where you follow the same characters through multiple books. And I ended up looking up online and finding out that Colleen Hoover has a series of 3 books where you follow the same characters through. So I went to the bookstore to pick up those books, and then I found this one. And those are the only 4 that I bought. I kept it to 4. But that's what I ended up reading next, that romance series. And the first book in the series is Maybe Someday. I have a hard time with Colleen Hoover. I don't know. I either really, really, really like her books, or I just think they're kind of meh. And I can't remember what the last one, I'm looking through my reading journal right now. I can't remember what my last Colleen Hoover was. I know that not that long ago I read November 9, and that was, oh no, that was the last Colleen Hoover book I read, November 9, and I gave it 5 stars. I loved it. I loved it. And so of course that makes me want to read more of her books. It sucks me in. And so when I saw that she had this series that was like focused around the same main characters, I was like, okay, last book I read from her was November 9. I really, really liked it. Let's give it a try. This was more of a meh for me. I actually really like the 2 main characters. The 2 main characters, it's told from both of their perspectives, Sydney and Ridge. I really like both of them. Like, I really liked them. I just didn't like their relationship together. The main character, Sydney, and I'm not really giving anything away because I think it's what it tells you on like the back of the book. But basically, you know, she and her boyfriend end up breaking up because he cheats on her. She's kind of put in a funky position where she doesn't really have anywhere to stay. And so she ends up moving in temporarily with Ridge, who lives in a different apartment in the same complex that she was living in. And then their love story begins. Except that Ridge has a girlfriend of 6 years, of 5 years, close to 6 years. And that just really just ended up putting a bad taste in my mouth. Like, the story is about developing feelings for someone when you know you shouldn't, and how that's sometimes inevitable and you can't sometimes control that, and how these two main characters really do try to not develop feelings for each other, and they really do try to honor Ridge's relationship with his girlfriend. But I still didn't like it. Like, I still didn't like that he had a girlfriend. You know what I mean? Like, that still put me off. And so even though I really liked the two characters in it, I just was very frustrated with the fact that he had a girlfriend. And so in the end, I ended up giving this 3.5 stars. I did immediately go into the second book in the series, which is called Maybe Not. And it is a short little novella style book. And similar to Terms and Conditions, I open it up and I was very shocked that it is not about the same characters that are in the first one, which was a little frustrating. But it's about characters that you meet in the first book. Basically, Sydney moves in with Ridge. Ridge has 2 roommates. This is about the other 2 roommates and the romance that they have going on. And I actually ended up really liking this. I liked this way more than I liked Maybe Someday. So I ended up in the end being happy that it wasn't about those 2 characters. And I gave this 4 stars. I enjoyed it. I thought it was cute. And I think it was kind of like the perfect length. Like, it was a perfect story to be told in like in a novella style format, you know? So I ended up really liking this. Then I picked up the third book in the series, which is called Maybe Now. And I really didn't know what I was in for with it, given, you know, the second book. But we do go back to Sydney and Ridge. The story is about Sydney and Ridge. But we also get perspectives on Ridge's ex-girlfriend, Maggie, and a new man that she has met, Jake, right? Jake, I think. And I wasn't expecting that. So I was initially like a little concerned, like, oh gosh, we're getting Maggie's perspective, we're getting this random guy's perspective. Ugh, is that going to take away from the book? Honestly, in the end, I ended up thinking that it added to the book. I will say I was happy. I enjoyed reading about Sydney and Ridge more, and Maybe Now, having Ridge's relationship with Maggie completely over and ended, and him focusing on building a relationship with Sydney. It's what I wish Maybe Someday would have been. You know what I mean? Like, I wish there had never been that Maggie obstacle, because she's not an obstacle. She's a person that was in a 5-year relationship with someone, you know? So I did enjoy reading about how Sydney and Ridge were starting their relationship and falling in love with each other. But reading about Maggie was almost even more intriguing. Like, she's in a really funky, weird place, and it's about her trying to figure out what the heck she wants for the rest of her life. You know what I mean? And I really enjoyed that, and I really enjoyed getting her perspective, and I really enjoyed getting the perspective of the guy that she meets. My only complaint about this is I feel like it was too rushed in the end. Like, you leave off with these characters, you know, and they've, you know, Sydney and Ridge have been together for a few months. Maggie and Jake are barely together, and then it does a cut forward in time, but it's a very short cut forward in time, like a few months, and they're making like insane, like life-changing decisions, and I just felt like it was rushed. Like, I felt like Colleen Hoover tried to create like a very like closed off story, which I think she could have done. I just think that the time jump that she created wasn't long enough, you know, to justify what happens. So I felt like the ending was rushed. But I did enjoy this more than Someday, maybe Someday. And so I ended up giving it 4 stars. And the last book that we're going to talk about, the last book that I read this month, which I'm actually still reading. Again, I'm filming this video on September 30th. It's the last day of the month. I'm definitely going to finish this book today. I don't know if you can see, but I only have like a tiny bit left. I've read over 150 50 pages of this book, and that is 99% by Sally Thorne. So Sally Thorne is the author of The Hating Game. The Hating Game is one of my absolute favorite romances. It is the first, I think, romance that I ever read, and I loved it. It was so good. I gave it 5 stars, and I pretty much immediately picked up this book. But I decided to kind of hold on to it for a little while because I felt like it was very unrealistic for it to live up to The Hating Game, and I didn't want to go into it with like crazy expectations and then be really let down. So I ended up just putting this on my bookshelf, and after I finished Maybe Now, there was only a few days left in the month, so I knew I needed to pick something up that I was going to be able to finish in a few days, or at least I wanted to. I didn't want to start any of the books that are my October TBR, so I ended up picking this up. I'm not done with it, but I'm really far along. And what I will say is that I'm really, really enjoying it. And unless something wild and crazy and ridiculous happens at the end, this is definitely going to be a 4.5 stars for me. I don't like it as much as The Hating Game, but it is still really, really good, and I'm really, really enjoying it. It is childhood friends to lovers, which is a trope that I really, really like. I like friends to lovers in general, but within that trope, I love childhood friends to lovers, like Love in Other Words, Every Summer After, those types of books. And while this is not like similar to those in terms of like the location and the setting, or like the situation where we jump back and forth in time, it is childhood friends to lovers, and I'm really, really enjoying that. So I anticipate this being a 4.5 star read for me. And that is it. Those are all of the books that I read in September 2022. I hope you enjoyed hearing about all of these books. I hope that there's a couple that I read that you're now interested in. If you have any questions or comments about these books, please don't hesitate to put them down below. And as always, everyone, please be safe. Bye-bye.